Teleprompter. Welcome back to Cheche. We're having a heated discussion, both during the show and during the break. But we're discussing implementing the Constitution, and that's because an interim report has been released by a working group commissioned by the National Assembly. And so that report was commissioned on behalf of the National Assembly by Mutava Muslimi in his capacity as chair of the National Assembly's Budget Committee. And we have two members of the working group with us, Dr. Nuno from Moi University and Susan Mangani from Kipra. We've talked about the different levels of government. Very quickly now, because I seem to be under time pressure, Parliament. We've talked about the Senate and their refusal to participate in this process. And the report, the interim report, actually takes stock of the strained working relationship between the National Assembly and the Senate, and talks about, asks a couple of questions. Does Parliament require additional capacity to discharge its mandate of oversight and budget making? Is technical capacity being built to address this gap? With a membership of 349 in the National Assembly, do members have sufficient opportunity to contribute to debates? On the other hand, lack of quorum has been observed frequently. Candidates are not allowed to run for more than one office in an election, with the consequence that presidential election losers, who are leaders of their parties, we know one in particular, are subsequently excluded from mainstream political platforms. How are you trying to address these challenges?
First of all, in the view of whether the Parliament right now with the new arrangement has got capacity to carry out its function, core of it, of course, being legislation, representation and oversight, you have to go back to the system which we have. We have a pure presidential system. And so I think we are experiencing challenges understanding that system, because the pure presidential system then demands that Parliament operates through parliamentary committees. So committees become so strong. In other jurisdictions where we have a similar system, you find that committees are very well resourced, and whichever decision that comes from that committee is almost final. But if you try to compare, for instance, the jurisdiction like the US, and what we have here, you'll sympathize with Parliament. They're not well resourced.
Okay, but what you're recommending here is that they should review membership of all standing committees in order to confirm that the individuals deployed there have the requisite skills, experience and integrity, and that individual members do not sit on an excessive number of committees, thus rendering their participation ineffective. Yes, I was going to
pass in and just say, I think before you finalize this report, you might want to talk to Parliamentary Service Commission, because I know there was a heavy recruitment over the last 1 year to strengthen the capacity, the technical capacity of support to the committees. Number two, probably the most important of those committees is the Parliamentary Budget Office, because government is about money and so on and so forth. And I can tell you, as I sit here today, I feel very proud of the Parliamentary Budget Office. Our Parliamentary Budget Office is rated, is in the top 10 bracket in the world, and it gives us the support and all the information that we require before we take decisions. And so I would say, please go back and interrogate that a bit more. Going back before we go on with Parliament, I think before you finalize with this report, you really have to go to talk to Treasury, and I've made this point to Banarotich and the Principal Secretary, as indeed you need to reach out even more to the Senate, because the points that David is raising about fiscal management, these are issues that are better answered by Treasury, not just the CRA, not just control of budget. Those are ipso facto institutions, but Treasury runs with it on a day-to-day basis.
Okay, so let's come then to the issue of your committee's experience, integrity and skills.
The key question there is integrity. I mean, we've had issues of committees sitting on the reports. We had issues with PAC, we've had issues with agriculture. So we are saying that Parliament should also be in a position just to assure Kenyans that they're of integrity, So those committees...
But Ms. Wangani, these sound rather vague, unfortunately. When you say review, what do you mean? Because if you look at the experience we've had with the pact, one person has stood aside, but we know that various other members who were named have been absorbed into other committees.
That's what you're pointing to. That's what we are saying.
Right.
What you are saying. And Parliament, that one does not even need a constitutional amendment or a legislation. I mean, they can do it through their standing orders. And what you're saying, they should be able, because Parliament is the overarching oversight institution. So if you're going to have committee with questionable membership, with integrity,
what are you saying they should do?
What you're saying is that the Parliament should ensure that members who go there, first of all, they have the technical, almost similar technical skills to the work which they're expected to do. For instance, the Budget and Appropriation Committee. You are not going to get there someone who does not even understand. And I'm sure members of Parliament have gone to school. So this idea of saying that they don't know anything, they have certain...
I know that the Speaker of the National Assembly and the leadership of the National Assembly has actually sought to address this matter.
How so?
I think we went for a retreat about 6 weeks ago, and it was globs of conversation, and some changes I think have been seen. My bigger worry, and I mean, as a member of Parliament, obviously I think we can always improve. My bigger worry is the oversighting role of the county assemblies, because a lot of money is going to county government. What capacity do the county assemblies have to oversight the governor and his executive? That is probably, to me, is the bigger concern.
Okay, we'll come to that in a minute, but let's just stay in a minute with the National Assembly, because we have heard about rent seeking. We have heard about, challenges to do with the integrity. What do you do with those as a member of the National Assembly? You tell us that, the leadership is dealing with it. How? Are we going to see people who are named asked to step aside?
I know action was taken in PSC, for example. Action was taken in PSC, and I think that's in the public domain.
But I just referred to that. Ababana members stood aside, but members of that committee who were named have been absorbed into other committees. So all you've done is you're playing musical chairs.
But not holding the same positions. Not holding the same positions. A chair of a committee.
But why should they be holding the position?
Because they're elected leaders. You see, you cannot be in Parliament and not belong to a committee. You will belong to a committee.
And if you have served in a committee and there are questions over your integrity, should you still be in a committee? Should you still be in Parliament?
No, ask the auditors, because somebody has been in other jurisdictions, in other parliamentary systems. If there has been a problem with a member of Parliament, they don't quit their office.
But you're not serving the
unless it's a very serious matter, and that's for the party to decide. Some decisions are made by the party, you see. I'm not sure that at this stage in our growth you want to say that there have been problems in PSC, for example, and therefore so and so and so and so cannot sit in another committee. They were elected by their various constituencies.
It's not. Is it that if you are elected, you must sit in a committee? I mean, those are house traditions in there.
In Parliament,
if a member is of such character and law integrity as not to preside over any matter.
In Parliament, you always belong to committees.
I think
so that's the whole point. This always part against all odds.
Is the problem that the person was elected in the first place? Do you see? The quality of the person who voters chose was not of one that should have been in Parliament, maybe.
But that's the decision of the voter. You can't decide for them without respect.
Also, we looked at the leadership.
Voted you in as a member of Parliament, or as a senator, or as an MCA.
I don't think that the honourable member is explaining this thing properly, because what is the ultimate punishment that Parliament can give to a member who has no integrity or is essentially criminal?
Parliament doesn't sanction. Parliament also builds capacity. Parliament also gives room for growth. I think you need to find balance somewhere. And mind you, you have only 5 years. You have like in this case, it's about 4 years and a half. So you need to be careful how you deal with these things. They're more delicate than you're making them sound.
The point I want to raise is that in doing this work, we also looked at certain legislation that have been made to try and give effect to the implementation of the Constitution. And key of them is the Leadership and Integrity Act. And concerns have been raised that is very weak. It's very weak in terms of its punitive measures.
Watered down.
Yeah, and that's what we are saying. And if you read our report, you will see a recommendation which you are saying, because this is a road deal to Kenyans. Kenyans wanted a situation whereby an elected leader or appointed leader, you are found with questions of integrity, you go home. If you are found guilty, if you are holding the office, you go home. Then if you are not yet elected, then you should be barred from holding an office. But now that will cure. But again, it will cure that problem, because if it's about all leaders, and I think Parliament will also have to be part and parcel of it. So the challenge is with the Leadership and Integrity Act.
Okay.
But I think let me come in. The beginning problem is the nature of the Kenyan voter. The Kenyan voter either votes on the basis of who has money, or who can lie most, or who can, without benchmarking.
I beg your pardon. They also vote on the
I'm coming to that. Also on performance.
Please do.
But no, there are three.
Please do.
So there are those that vote on... No, but sure, honestly, because the integrity issue that comes to Parliament has to do with the voter, and has much more to do with the voter than the person. Or first of all, they're in the minority. You need to take cognizance of that. Those people that with integrity questions out of the 349 are in the minority. But having said that, when they come to Parliament, when voters are voting, they need to have enough understanding of the kind of person they're elected. So there's need for civic education at that level, for people to understand the qualities to look for in their leaders. That's one. Once that is done, the Leadership and Integrity Act and Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission Act both have roles more or less that have turned out to be ceremonial, because what happens, people fill in forms yearly. Every 2 years you fill asset and finance status forms, no follow-up. There's no means of auditing that and following it up. There's need to ensure that every kind of information obtained from an individual is able to be followed, so that 2 years down the line, you're able to query this person. Ethics and Corruption Commission lately had been calling people on the basis of the forms they fill in. But we see that selective. How was that be able to be discerned from the massive several thousands of applicants, including those who lost elections, that were filled in? So there's need to ensure that information is put into use or discarded completely.
And public participation
doesn't have any purpose.
At that level.
Okay, we're out of official time. I'm living on borrowed time, and I want to address this quickly. Vetting. Because there's a very specific recommendation on that. In response to experience where candidates proposed by the President for appointment have been passed, despite reservations from committee members, the national interest should be put first. Safeguards introduced to strengthen the transparency of the vetting process, candidates' experience and academic qualifications, compliance with provisions of the Constitution with respect to integrity and views from stakeholders should be explicitly considered. This is not happening?
It's not happening.
Really?
Yeah, even if it's happening, it's not that effective. The thing is, in a presidential system, Parliament is supposed to act as a whole, as one.
Right.
When checking the
I think we are talking theories here.
Really?
Oh, yes.
In what sense?
Parliament supposed to act as one is theory, complete theory, because the people in state, the President and the party in Parliament act as one to deliver a manifesto because they won the elections. In Parliament, there is also an opposition, so to speak. That's where you have decisions made through voting. You are into politics, and it's that way in Britain, it's that way in the United States, in Canada, Australia. We are no different. So when you say Parliament acting as one, it's theory.
You're contradicting yourself, because earlier on we were talking about the separation of powers and the legislature acting in the interests of people and the executive, you know, implementing, you know, looking after the country.
It's theory because if today David was the president and they had the majority votes in the National Assembly and in the Senate, and there's something he wants to achieve in the 5 years, he would work with his troops in Parliament to achieve that manifesto. Let's get real.
That's true, except that in the matter of national interest and in the matter of vetting of public officers, I mean, the president can get many others if there's an integrity question on this particular one. That's what we are saying. Then the functioning of Parliament is disabled.
I have known committees differing with names that were brought by the president. I have seen that happen.
You've seen that happen, but what we've also seen is that after that dissent, there's a whipping, and whatever concerns existed...
Or change of the names. Or change of the names. I think it happened in TSC, for example. I can think of 1 or 2 institutions where that
David,
happened.
you're troubled.
Yeah, I mean, on this one, Mutabo, we have to agree to disagree, because that is one of the biggest problems we have with the National Assembly. This gun thing that, look, this is our person, they'll pass regardless of what objections will be raised. And that's why we are calling on the conscience of members. At that point, can they separate themselves from their political party affiliation, even their manifestos? Even those manifestos, by the way, talk about integrity. So what we are seeing here is extreme partisanship, where people are brought in just like that.
But you know, I keep telling you, David Cameron today is the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, or of Britain, United Kingdom. That's how he'll operate, with a majority in the House of Commons. That's how politics works. That's why you go to the people to elect. And once you are elected, you have a manifesto. You put your people, you put your team together.
But sir, the whole idea of this audit, wasn't it to see what value we're getting? And at the moment, it sounds like when it comes to vetting of nominees, we're not getting much value out of our National Assembly.
What I would suggest, and I'm not holding brief for anybody. Generally, I also am my own man in a lot of these things. Do more research, do more work. And I said it yesterday in the meeting, in the report. I said, please get real. I said it yesterday, and I'll say it here again. As you do the audit,
Get real in what sense?
Connect with the reality of politics and with the reality of how countries and how governments work around the world. Don't lose your ideals. Don't lose your values, but relate them to the reality of political activity in any government anywhere. Ours is no different.
They certainly can do that, but what responsibility do the politicians, do the implementers of the Constitution have to also hold themselves to higher ideals? Because you can bring out the best audit report with the best recommendations. We seem to have one of the best constitutions in the world, but the implementers are at fault.
Exactly.
So where does that come in?
I happen to know, for example, that there's been a lot of hue and cry about quite a number of appointments, and a lot of them happen within the Jubilee family. I can't say more because I know where they happen is normally in certain enclosures, but do not imagine that all the appointments are received very, very well.
Sir, with respect, you're not answering my question.
Yeah.
But they pass.
You are implementers of the Constitution. What ideals are you holding yourselves to? What best practices and standards are you holding yourselves to, even if we have the best audit with the best recommendations in the world? And you tell us, well, that's all lofty, but this is real. We're dealing with real politics.
Yes.
When the report was given yesterday, I'll tell you the 2 words I used, and I meant it. I said, let's put the best ideas on the table. Let's put values on the table. Because at the end of the day, it is the merit of the ideas and the merit of values. But you are in a context of politics and a context of human nature.
Contextualize.
And competition and the history and ambitions. And you've got to put those ideals and values in that real context and then work through and get the best you can get in that context.
Let me ask you a question on that vetting matter in a nutshell. Are you satisfied with the performance of the nominations committee, the joint nominations committee? Because that's really the big issue. Or should there be other mechanisms perhaps to...
Sorry, what do you mean by joint nominations
committee? The nominations committee of the House is normally comprised of the Senate and National Assembly.
Not normally.
It is.
For the greatest part. For the greatest part, it's actually National Assembly. Most of the appointments are actually through National Assembly.
Okay, but the question remains, though. The question is still valid.
Yeah.
Are you satisfied with the process?
Or more can be done?
Well, what do you mean, am I satisfied with the process? That's what the Constitution demands.
Is it an effective instrument for vetting? Let me put it that way.
You are saying, what would I change?
Yes.
That's
because
why
of the partisan interests, can we vest that duty on that committee?
The fact that I'm seated here, having played a small role in getting this process to go on, tells you I too have questions.
Right.
Yes.
Okay, so the client is...
In a lot of areas. In a lot of areas.
Okay.
Okay, so that will be the client's last word. The working group hopefully will have taken the recommendations. We will see how much of our viewers' feedback we can share with you. But David, panelist, your opinion. Do you think that this audit report and what we've heard and discussed so far goes far enough in ensuring that the aspirations that are enshrined in the Constitution are met through public institutions, but also properly resourced?
I think not. Let me say that. I think not, because we look at the history of this committee. When it was set up, it was juxtaposed with the Okoa Kenya initiative. People said, look, don't rush to just...
Okoa Kenya came later.
Well, I'm just saying. People said, we're auditing, wait for the findings of this committee so that we can actually do a comprehensive review of the Constitution. Now, yes, there was an argument that we haven't audited the full Constitution, how far we've gone, we can't begin piecemeal amendments to it, so let's do an audit, and then after that we can evaluate and then go forward.
But so Kenya came much later.
Yes, it did, but there were, things happening. So my view is that I think I've seen some recommendations, but I think they're also shy from being radical in terms of addressing the sickness that we are facing here. I will hope that National Assembly will donate some powers to the Senate to ease this fight.
Donate?
Including vetting. They should remove themselves from it and leave it to the Senate, things like those. Are you generous like that?
You have to follow the law.
But you seem to be preparing for your future. We will continue this conversation once we're off air, but in the meantime, I'd like to thank our guests from the working group auditing the Constitution, Susan Mangani from Kipra, Dr. Nuno from Moi University, the client, Mutabu Musiemi, who's the chair of the National Assembly's Budget and Appropriations Committee, and to our panel of one, David McCulley. We thank you also for watching and for engaging with us.